Since the Sandy Hook shooting, more than 400 people have been shot in a school shooting situation. We see and hear about mass shootings more and more every day. And as we do, local schools are fighting back, hoping they won't be next on the list.
As an administrator, this is something that I fear every day of my life.
When you hear about a school shooting, the response is too often, it'll never happen here. But the truth is, it can. And what if it does? Schools in the Mid-Ohio Valley say they refuse to sit by.
We're making sure that our employees are trained and they're ready to do whatever it takes to make sure that our students are safe in our schools.
As the year progressed and the shootings continued to happen and they seemed to escalate, everything changed.
We have to be prepared for what might happen. And, if you don't know what you would do if you were put into a situation, then sometimes you don't always make the best decision.
Students who don't feel safe in a facility are not going to be able to reap the benefits of meaningful education.
Just last week, Wood County Schools passed a levy that will give their safety department funding to work with, a department whose budget used to be zero.
Just take a look at our entrances to our buildings, the numbers of doorways and accesses into the buildings, and how do we secure those things to make sure that people are not defeating the stuff that we put in.
The days of being able to just walk into a school are over. All visitors now have to buzz in.
Hi, can I help you?
Hi, I'm here with WTAP.
I need to see your ID, please. Okay, come on in.
Thank you. In both West Virginia and Ohio, active shooter training is mandatory.
The entire staff was trained for ALICE.
Alert, lockdown, inform, confront, and evacuate.
There are 3 different kind of drills. There are mock drills, there are tabletop drills, and then there are full simulations. And you have to do one of those every year in a 3-year rotation.
Hearing live rounds out in the building, I think it just helps prepare us for something that we hope never happens.
While the concept of ALICE training is nothing new, the strategies have changed in recent years.
It used to be lock down, hunker down, and stay put where you are, and hope that that hiding will give you enough time for first responders to get there.
However, studies from former school shootings show that evacuating is the best strategy. And if you can't leave, they say to fight back against a shooter when you're confronted.
The recommendation came down in 2013 to get away from the lockdown mentality, and finally that's starting to happen here locally, and that's a good thing.
On average, it takes law enforcement 4 to 6 minutes to respond to an active shooter situation. Schools are working to minimize the damage during that time.
Make somebody have to work harder to get through the building. So the longer it takes for them to get from one side to the other, and then mix that in with evacuation, that all of a sudden that 3 minutes means that they have to go through multiple doors, and when they get to the other side, there's no students there.
Warren is building their new facilities with those and other safety strategies in mind, though many other districts in the area struggle to implement safety features in their dated facilities.
We're going to have additional cost. So the age of schools has a lot to do with when you're putting new technology in a building, how much that's going to run.
Know that our current facilities aren't up to standards that are set by the state. Our buildings are old. They were built at a different time.
Despite roadblocks, every school I talk to says safety is their top priority.
And I think that we are a much safer school now than what we were a year ago.
An officer's presence alone inside a school can deter bad things from happening, but having them there could save lives if anything does go wrong. Wood County is fortunate to have 8 resource officers, while other counties in the state have none.
All right, just checking on you.
For the last 19 years, Wood County schools have been fortunate to have resource officers inside schools. It started in 1999, and by 2017, every high school and middle school had its own officer.
Any resource officer you have on campus is tremendous, but ours particularly, Officer Moorhead, does a great job of just being out and about.
They monitor surveillance cameras, watch who comes in or out of the building, and help resolve conflicts. Resource officers also walk the halls, making their presence known by being a friendly face.
It's very important for the resource officers to be out, walking, being mobile, being seen. That alone is a deterrent for anything bad to happen.
And I know without a doubt that if something happens on campus and he is physically in this building, he's going to be going straight to the threat.
In recent school attacks, warning signs were missed with shooters, making many wonder if tragedies could have been prevented. The West Virginia Fusion Center has implemented a brand new system for officers to track a potential threat.
Basically, the officer in the schools or on the road can collect all the information they can on an individual, complete the worksheets as much as they can, and then on the back there is a threat level assessment grid.
They choose a threat level of low, medium, or high.
And that individual can go into a database where they can flag certain things on that person.
If the potential threat uses any trigger words on social media or has any suspicious activity, the resource officer is notified.
Another way for resource officers, even road officers, to stay proactive and stay on top of an incident instead of being reactive and wondering what if.
Resource officers are charged with the safety of everyone in the building, but their roles at the school go much greater than that.
Hey, I'm proud of you. Good job. Get that GPA up and it'd be even better.
Even though I'm not a counselor, that sometimes I fit in and slide into that role.
Oftentimes, some of the kids go to him, first.
They serve as a friend and mentor to the kids.
If you can make that one kid's day brighter, whether it's just talking to him and saying hello to him in the morning, you've made that kid's day.
This is more of like a day-to-day encounter, and not just if they've done something wrong or they've been injured or in a specific situation. And people get to see you in that atmosphere too.
I think it helps the police and the community relationship, especially with our young people.
Eats lunch with the kids. He's our football coach. He's in the classrooms. He instructs students as a lecturer. He's visible throughout the day, and he's an important part of what we do here on a daily basis.
This is a special job. You have to have a special mentality because you're going to see kids at their weakest moments.
The men in blue wear many hats in their efforts to protect our schools, each as important as the other, putting everything on the line.
I couldn't do this without him. I make that very clear.
Knowing that you're the one person here that is armed that can stop something, that kind of makes you think that you might be the first person they come after.
Arming teachers is a highly debated topic, but for Frontier schools, staff have carried guns in their building for over a year now, and it seems that they have a system that works. Frontier High School is uniquely located. It sits on Route 7, 22.5 miles from Marietta, dozens of minutes from the nearest law enforcement station.
The Sheriff's Department, depending on where the patrolman is located, it may take up to 45 minutes for somebody to get here.
We have 641 square miles, and with all the schools, due to our manpower, it is kind of hard to have somebody near there all the time.
In the case of an emergency, they don't know how long they'll have to wait for help to arrive.
Most school shooting situations are done and over with primarily within 10 minutes.
And there's a lot of people can be hurt or killed in that amount of time.
It's difficult to imagine, but we would have to step up and fill that gap until I get here.
They looked into options to take matters into their own hands.
We had talked to Frontier and several of the schools about a program that was being offered in Ohio, which is a very well organized, taught, it's a high-class program.
They call it an armed response team.
We can act first, so it's initial response.
There have already been several school shootings in 2018, but Frontier's armed response team was not a knee-jerk reaction to the tragedies of the last year. The long thought-out plans have been in the process for years now, and it couldn't be unfolding in a more timely fashion.
December of 16, we passed a resolution to allow for staff to be trained to carry concealed guns into our facilities.
The member of the armed response team that I spoke to will remain anonymous. Only members of the team, certain administration, and law enforcement know who's participating.
Carrying a gun with you every day, so we have to think about how to keep ourselves concealed so that the students and any guests and any potential bad people in the building don't know that we're armed. The element of surprise needs to be on our side.
They say the training is nothing to take lightly.
The initial training is a 3-day long training. You have to also pass the Ohio Policeman Academy test as far as with your firearm. And the teachers and faculty are held to a higher standard than that of a police officer.
Leading up to it, we have to do a lot of training on our own because it's very difficult standards, fast-paced.
We run a further background on them, and we have their photograph, and they also qualify with us.
When the Washington County Sheriff's Department goes to the gun range to shoot and train, members of the Armed Response Team here at Frontier go with them.
And that way our officers get to know who that person is, so if something does happen and they arrive, they'll know who the bad guys and who the good guys are.
Even with the training, they say it's a lot to handle.
It's not easy to really imagine when you think about it. It could be a really bad situation. We have to look at the bigger picture. The safety of the students is most important.
Does it weigh on your mind if you could make a mistake and what that could mean?
It does. That's the reality. Even law enforcement officers worry about that, and it does happen. But the bigger picture is that if I don't take action, then lots of people will die. If I take action, hopefully less people will die.
Yesterday, in zeroing in on school safety, we told you about a local school with armed teachers in their building. But how do the parents or students feel about it? And what does it mean for other schools in the Mid-Ohio Valley? Frontier High School has a team of staff members armed inside their school, ready to act and protect their students if an active shooter enters the school. They are tasked with a very serious and highly debated responsibility.
Our board meetings, we did have some positive and negatives, but primarily more positives.
French says response from the students has been positive.
Said they were happy that they didn't know who was participating, but they were happy that people were participating. They felt safer.
One parent says she's extremely grateful the school has taken on this responsibility.
No teacher went to school thinking that they were going to have to do this, and so I appreciate teachers in general. And the fact that they have taken and gone this extra mile for our children, they're the second parents 8 hours a day. We rely on them to keep our babies safe, and they've gone that much further, and tremendously grateful.
Across Washington County, Sheriff Larry Minks says he thinks other schools might follow in Frontier's footsteps.
I think that having armed teachers inside the school is part of the solution. However, I would say that is a decision that each school has to make on their own.
Other districts in the area have and still are attending the training, even though they're not authorized at the very moment.
We're going to start exploring that, and then we're going to make, I think, what's the best decision for our community, because we're going to have pros and cons against it. Educators are educators. They're not usually people that signed up to do something like that, so it takes the right person, the right mentality to be able to provide that.
The board hasn't made a decision one way or another, but we'll be looking at that soon so that we can decide.
And our relationship with Belpre PD is good enough and close enough that that we don't need armed people in our schools.
The decision to arm employees would need to come from the respective school boards, but one Wood County principal thinks an armed response team would be a positive thing.
I would be in favor of the administrators being armed, just as an opinion. I'm sure there's very capable people within the building too, to carry a firearm and to use it precisely. And if they go through the training, if that's what they decide to do, I'll be for that.
However, a school resource officer in Wood County says it would be a complicated process.
Teachers became teachers to teach, to educate. I became law enforcement because I wanted to protect and serve my community. There's risks of arming teachers.
The other teachers know that we are grateful for them too, even if they didn't volunteer. not everybody could do that. So, and I don't know if I could.
This year alone, we've had Parkland, Pittsburgh, and Thousand Oaks killing 40 people between the three. Our schools are pushing the importance of mental health now more than ever. Mass shootings becoming a norm in our society, from schools to churches, bars, or concerts.
People down. We need a lot of ambulance.
We are seeing more societal problems that are causing students to react in various ways, and some of these ways are not healthy and certainly unsafe.
I mean, these kids just start to get so down on themselves, and they don't know how to place their feelings, and they don't know what to do with them, and they just feel nobody cares, and they feel worthless, and they're like, well, I'm gonna make a name for myself, or I'm gonna do something to make sure that people see me.
But school systems are realizing they have the power to help the people that commit these crimes early on in life, changing the future of our country.
The child that is the most aggressive and the most angry is the one that needs the most love from you.
We talk a lot about hardening our schools, but I think the soft work that we're doing, the mental health piece, is undervalued.
Every kid must feel a deep connection with at least one adult in our system.
In Wood County, the board received state money to help with its mental health efforts.
They have hired extra counselors, so we have more counselors. You know, their ratio of students per counselor has been decreased through Project Aware.
Work with 3 agencies who actually come into the schools through expanded school-based mental health services and provide services one-on-one to our students on a weekly basis.
I targeted pre-K through first grade. And the reason for that targeting was we'd found that there's been a lot of research showing that a lot of adult problems and teenage problems, they manifest from childhood trauma.
It lends to greater risks of depression, suicide, alcohol or drug issues, and even health issues as adults.
Work directly with the staff to help them try to see if they were triggering any of those behaviors and if there was any way we could try to manage that better in the classroom.
Adams says she was immediately able to identify problems occurring in the classroom.
And then we had this one that just is very aggressive and very angry. So what do you do with them? You just separate them because you think that's going to be the best thing to do. But what happens is that child starts to solidify that idea that, you know, this is the person I am. I'm a bad person and I'm not good enough to be with them. Their behavior is actually trying to make sure somebody's going to be there for them. They push people away to try to make sure that they're going to stay there.
In Washington County this summer, all districts received trauma-informed care training for all staff members through the county health department and life and purpose services.
We've inserted some mental health services that we've never had before into our district, and I think people may not see the results of that, but those results are big.
We had such a great investment from the county to pass the levy for the mental health board. That was an investment through the community about the mental health and well-being of all the community members in Washington County.
Teachers and students in our area are learning ways to recognize signs of developing mental health problems and working together to cope.
So if we can teach students these skills for coping through these adverse childhood experiences while they're young, not only will it pay off in the schools, but it'll pay off later in life.